Welcome to the Hayes CISD Blended Learning video series. In every blended learning training, we always go back to our why. What are the problems we are trying to solve? What goals do we have to improve our practice? We know that a shift to student-centered blended learning can help us address district-wide core problems that impact learning. Let's explore how teachers across the district are using blended learning and specific strategies to better meet the needs of today's students. In this video interview, you will hear about the strategies Ms. Gonzales employs in her classroom and reflect on how they connect to the Hayes Pillars of Blended Learning. You will learn how she uses data to inform her planning, how she invests in and allocates time to maximize learning impact, the role of data in increasing student agency, strategies for differentiation, and routines and management processes that support independent learning. Throughout the video, you will notice this graphic. This indicates that a strategy being described can help teachers move their practice towards the distinguished criteria on the T-test rubric.
So you teach 5th grade ELAR and
Yes.
social studies, correct?
Correct, yes.
And then how many blocks do you teach, or how long are your blocks?
My blocks are 90 minutes each, and I have 2 blocks.
Why blended? Why was that a route you wanted to take?
When I took PDs within the district, I saw how many different aspects and skills that can be hit using the blended model.
So talk to me a little bit about how you plan as a team, and then how you take that and then you kind of put it into the blended model.
When we plan the unit, we start off thinking with the end in mind to ensure that all students practice these skills and show mastery. We use the data to drive our small groups, and we use the CBA data to drive the small groups, and the students that are struggling the most with the skills based on the CBA data, in Eduphoria, I use the item analysis from the drop-down button to see how well they did with each skill. If a skill is below 70%, I know that that's a skill that we need to focus on in small group. Maybe we didn't really focus on that in HMH too much as a whole group. So now I need to scale it down to even maybe differentiate with a different passage and work on that in small group with them. Additionally, we use the data in small group to focus on that skill. Even if the majority of the students scored well on that TEAC, during the CBA, I still target those students who continue to struggle with that skill.
How long do you guys do maybe a direct teach or a whole group lesson? Do you do it every day, and how long is it? You got in a lot of groups. I think you saw 3 groups while I was there, 20 minutes each. So just tell me about how that's structured.
So when they come in, we have a warm up and we have a root of the week. So that's what we focus on. We work on a different skill with that root each day. And then that takes about 5 minutes. I give them 5 minutes, the timer is done. And then we move on to HMH. Once 25 minutes is up, we finish with our whole group direct teach at that time. And then we move into stations. And that's our mini lesson. We work on the mini lesson together. We work on annotating. That's their time to give me constructed short responses based on the Google Slides that we have that the district has provided us.
Okay.
And that's their exit ticket too. So once they are done with the exit ticket, I go and look at their short constructed response. And that kind of gives me an idea. And I have a sticky note with me of who did well with that response based on the skill that we were working on. The whole group, if we were focused on central idea, and I see that someone was kind of, struggling with trying to come up with a response about central idea, then I make sure to write down their name. And at a different time, I know that I'm going to pull them to work on that skill.
Talk to me a little bit about how you decided what activities and what skills you were going to put into your stations. The word work is really awesome.
It's based on the data that we get from M-Class at the beginning of the year. I really liked to look and see where my students fell in the range, the decoding range, the fluency range, higher order thinking skills or just comprehension. Majority of both classes fell in the decoding and fluency range. I had above 61% that were well below in fluency and decoding. So I knew that was something that I really needed to focus on. So I knew decoding was a skill that we needed to work on, and fluency as well. But I was trying to figure out a way, how can they get as much exposure as possible besides just in whole group direct teach lessons. So I focused on the M-Class decoding and fluency lessons that they provide, which are amazing because you have a teacher scripted lesson that you can go off of. In playlist, I know that I use the HMH fluency that we were given. And then in Schoology, everything's kind of ready to go. So I read the teacher script from the HMH book, and then I just record myself on the hovercam.
Okay.
And that's another way they get exposed to a different fluency decoding lesson too.
Let's pause a moment to dig into this blended learning strategy. Ms. Gonzales uses her HMH materials already in Schoology and records a digital mini lesson. She is essentially cloning herself and giving students agency to adjust the pacing of their learning. Students who need more time to process the concept may pause and rewind the video as needed to clarify their understanding or follow along with her on a process. She then posts this video in Schoology to give students anytime, anyplace access to the learning content.
We are now going to be working on our blend and read for Monday fluency. Words with ooh and ooh, ooh and ooh. This one's going to be a little bit harder this week, so I'm just going to kind of pronounce it up here. It's like a ooh and ooh, like you, but ooh, like that. And this is not the correct spelling at all, but this is kind of helping me pronounce it, because even me as a teacher, I have to say it out loud. Okay, so you're going to see the ooh sound spelled all these different ways. You're going to hear the ooh sound you're going to see it spelled all these different ways.
So when you first started Blended, did you start with the videotaped lessons like from the get-go, or is that something that kind of has evolved for you?
Yes, that's definitely evolved in our playlist fluency station. So with the stations, with the playlist, I originally started with just 3 boxes in the playlist, and I didn't hold any groups at that time. I just kind of started with playlist, and I just kind of monitored. I walked around because there
so
were
it'd be like if
stations.
you were just doing regular stations that wasn't blended, like when you start to introduce stations, you take yourself out of the rotation, get them used to it, and then you can feel more comfortable pulling a group.
Yes.
Another question about the lessons or the activities that you did in your stations. Did you have to teach the kids how to use your videotape lessons? Did you have conversations with them about, okay, because it was awesome is that there was a young man who wasn't quite sure. And so he stopped it and he rewound the video and he looked at it again and then he stopped. And then there's another little girl who will make sure she has all her materials and then she hits play and then she will rewind if she needs to. So, because I feel like that management piece is crucial to Blended. And talk to me how you kind of set that up.
So when it came to the fluency station, that was a lot of modeling and a lot of problem solving out loud for me at first. Okay. We would sit whole group first and I would introduce, okay, this is the folder in Schoology that we're going to start using. This is a fluency station. And then I had them repeat what folder is this? And they would say it's a fluency station. I'd open it up. We'd look at the numbers. I had numbers 1 through 3 at that time. So we talked about what number we always would start off with in that folder. What's the last number we end with in that folder? Number 1 would always either be blend and read through HMH. So it's just a mini lesson over highlighting and annotating and taking notes over the mini lesson. The second one would be a spelling sort where they're actually physically having those words in their hand and having to decode them and sort them based on the wording or the lesson the spelling pattern that we are focused on. We would just have those conversations after I modeled it, that they were going to start tracking their own success. And we would talk about their accountability. They would have to use their time wisely in order to be able to see this success for them and to see the progress, the growth. They would have to hold themselves accountable in stations, in the fluency station and the playlist. I just continued to build that culture with them and present those values and a growth mindset, that these are the skills that you need to be successful in that fluency station. And they would have to give that effort too. I'm providing them with this lesson and this fun activity because they really like the spelling sort. They like cutting, they like gluing, they like highlighting, they like all those materials, and they like knowing that they need to pause the video to get all those items together before they start the lesson.
Kind of to carry on with that accountability piece, you also have a station but you did have them with their data tracker, their CBA, they could look at what they were having difficulty with and then kind of make their own choices in terms of what their learning was on Learning Farm. So Is that something that you have throughout the school year? Is it just after CBAs? Is there any other data that you use as well for them to track their learning in that software?
So it's solely off of their CBAs. Learning Farm is pretty new to them. I introduced that to them after their first CBA. So we looked at the heat map first after their first CBA, and we were able to graph or shade in by each skill if we got that question wrong. So I told them if they got 2 or more questions wrong on that skill, circle it, and we'll come back to it in a little bit. I'll introduce why you're circling that skill. So then I introduced Learning Farm, and that was another model. I introduced what it looked like. It was a lot of training on where to go in Learning Farm too, because there's maybe 2 or 3 steps that they have to go to get to the reading tab, and then to go and look for those skills, because the skills aren't just listed for you. You have to hover around each little notebook. So that's what Learning Farm is used for. I feel like it's a time saver. I do have activities in class based on each skill and TEAC, but Learning Farm has everything there. It's a directed lesson. It has a directed lesson. It has test mode, and then it goes into game mode while they're learning at the same time too. The paper skills that I have in class, I would have to monitor that by erasing it or, printing out more papers for them and kind of having to go over their data and see, did they do well on it, where Learning Farm gives me immediate feedback in how they're doing with that skill.
Do you use the data that you get from Learning Farm? Do you have individual conversations with kids? Is there an expectation of how many lessons they need to get done in a week, or how does that work?
There's a progress bar that we look at, and I see how they're doing with that skill. Their goal, and I told them at the beginning whenever I introduced Learning Farm to them, is that they have to get to 70% on that skill for it to be mastered. So they know that if they get to 70%, that it gives them a bronze medal. If they get above that, they either get a gold medal or a silver medal. And with that, they get a reward for mastering that skill. And then so I'm able to see what they were working on, what they still didn't really understand with that skill. So that's really helpful whenever it comes to using the heat map that the district provides. And then we just got introduced we had the second CBA, and I used the other heat map. So we compared the skills at that time to see, did you master that skill from the one that you circled from the first CBA, or are you focused on another skill now? And some were really eager to raise their hand and tell me, I mastered the other skill. I got no questions wrong on this CBA. We had another conversation on how that was their success. That was their point where they needed to give them a pat on the back or kiss your brain moment, because they were able to see their growth and they were able to compare the heat maps to one another, and the smiles on their faces really showed me and them that stations were working, and the model was working, and we had a conversation to let's continue to do this. Let's continue to use our time wisely because you are showing great success that way too.
Um, so once we do a test, we put our score, and then so I had blue.
Oh, awesome. Okay. And so wait, let's look at that a little bit. So you have your different CBA scores and stuff, and how do you use this with your playlist?
Oh, this is just our scoring chart, and then
So
we
it's your
set a goal
goals?
for ourselves.
Okay, so you set your goals and stuff, and so you kind of set these after you take a test?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you keep up with that because it goes with, let's see, these. So tell me about how you've used those before. Didn't y'all use those for your learning farm?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about what those are for.
So we circle one that we need help with,
Okay.
and then we go to learning farm, and then look under 5.7D,
Okay.
and then do that work.
Okay, and was that on your playlist?
Yes.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the time saver for you. I know that one of the reasons when I started Blended, I moved into it is because teachers never have enough time to cover everything. And they always need to meet with small groups. You also differentiate your guided reading groups. And I noticed that in Schoology, you had different folders based on the group. So just talk about maybe how you set up those stations, guided reading, and then how it's helped with your time.
I use the HMH growth reading reports, and we took that at the beginning of the year, and it showed me their Lexile levels. I have two different sets of groups. I base it off of M-Class decoding and fluency and that data first. So that's how I met with them the first maybe 6 to 9 weeks of school, just based on the M-Class information. That's what we went off of until the first CBA. And then I also used the HMH growth report after that to meet with them in Lexile level groups based on their Lexile levels. I saw and noticed that I needed some students that needed extensions, needed to really expand on their thinking skills. That's what I really focused on in small group. The stations really helped me save time because I was able to put in Amplify during station time. And I used a timer. Everything was digital. So they had to hold themselves accountable for that time because they knew that I was going to come in and see the data from the Amplify and see did they meet that 20 minutes of time. So everything was available for me instantly through a computer. So that was a big time saver too. But when it comes to HMH fluency or the short constructed responses, everything was there for me in Schoology already. I just had to pull it over to my folders for them to for me to enable and for them to respond to. Really, the only thing that takes time is just getting the fluency folder ready for them. And
Right.
everything's there for me. I just have to make that mini lesson for them, at least 1 to 2 videos, less than 15 minutes. At least.
How long does it take you normally in the week to get your lessons taped and in there? How much of your planning time does that take in your day?
It takes less than 30 minutes now. I kind of have a routine that I'm going with now where I get it done at the beginning of the week. I pull everything. I print the blend and read pages. I print the show what you know pages. And then I take a look at them and I take a look at my teacher script HMH book. Once I record that video, it's kind of smooth sailing after that because everything just needs to be uploaded into Schoology, or my mini lesson needs to be uploaded into Schoology. And that's really the main part.
The playlist has really cool social studies activities. Is any portion of your week devoted to any type of direct teach or whole group teach of social studies? And then when do you decide, or what do you decide to put into your playlist for social studies?
We don't have any more direct teach for social studies at this time. Okay. Our main focus is 15 minutes of writing, HMH writing, and then 25 minutes whole group HMH reading. And then I really want to hit those small groups.
Okay.
So I've integrated social studies into our playlist. Right now we're covering the American Revolution. So we're just following that timeline. A lot of our social studies activities are WebQuest with Ducksters, and then they have to go in and take an assessment in Schoology and go find the information first and to go answer it. in a Schoology assessment. So it gives me immediate feedback on their grade and how.
Accountability on them actually doing it. Okay.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about your management, because you have this really amazing thing where the kids have a Padlet and you have it at your station, and then they can ask you questions. I think one little boy I saw, he was asking you if he could listen to music, and you were like, if you're supposed to be reading, no, you don't need to have your music on. I noticed that you were very quickly able to do that. There was no disruption to your lesson. There was no disruption in your classroom. Did you do that from the beginning, or is that something that you evolved and were like, oh, this would work?
So a former teacher that used to work here, who is now a blended instructional coach as well in a different district.
Awesome. Okay.
She was actually the one that introduced Padlet to us. And the students really like to use that because they like the idea of text messaging us, like chatting with us. I've integrated that into our playlist too. And they like the idea of being able to chat with me even when I'm not physically able to answer it.
If a child is not successful, if they're having difficulty with a skill or they're having difficulty with something, how do you kind of troubleshoot and help kids that are not being successful with blended learning?
It can be overwhelming with the playlist and with the stations and with the fluency station and those assignments. We start just circling items that they must do. I say, okay, because I noticed that, yes, they do get pulled out for HB 4545 or for any type of dyslexia services or special education services. And a lot of them are coming up to me and kind of overwhelmed that they weren't getting to anything on the playlist, or they were leaving. We did end up circling 3 items from the playlist. And I told them, if you get to these 3 items, this is what you're going to focus on. Don't worry about the others right now. Just concentrate on these 3. I've even had to scale back to just 1 item from the playlist, just if they're getting pulled, or because sometimes they are tardy, they misplace where they're at in their playlist. I circle 1 item for them, and that's where they start, and that's where I modify for them and just help them out that way. Same with the fluency. I tell them, if you can get to items 1 and 2, that's okay. Let's focus on 1 and 2 right now. And if we need to, we'll go to 3 and 4. But right now, just focus on 1 and 2. So just a lot of modifications for them.
You talk a little bit about your students who need enrichment. They are getting through the playlist. And I do notice that you have some get to items on your list. What types of things do you do to enrich your higher level kids?
So HMH has some projects, and those are the extensions that they are able to do once they get through the playlist.
If you were going to talk to a new teacher who wanted to implement blended learning in their classroom, what would be some things that you would suggest, tips and things like that, but also how has the motivation and engagement of your kids versus before blended and now, how has that changed? So 2 questions. 1, tips and things you give to a teacher. And then secondly, changes in motivation and engagement.
Tips to give to a teacher, I would say to start small at first. Don't be hard on yourself. 1 subject at a time whenever you start with the playlist, just so it won't be overwhelming to the students and overwhelming for you that you have to gather all these things and print all these things out. I feel like the students need to feel successful just as much as the teacher does. Being able to get through that 1 subject or those 3 boxes in playlist, and they can say, I did it. And then the teacher can say, I did it too. That's amazing. That's amazing to feel that you actually accomplished that for you and for the student too, just to feel successful. For students, I noticed that when they started to track their own data, like their fluency charts or their CBA heat map from CBA 1 and CBA 2, and notice the different skills that they didn't have to work on that skill anymore from the CBA 1, they can see that their work is improving because they're holding themselves accountable and they're being successful. There's now less redirection that needs to happen during my small group time. They know what they need to do and they use their time wisely because they can visually see, okay, my fluency chart is moving up and my data charts are improving. My skills are improving because I am holding myself accountable and putting in that effort. So I don't have to redirect as much anymore. And also just keeping the routines the same. and the procedure is consistent. That allows me time, that allows the kids to feel like they can internalize the expectations too. And they like meeting in small group too. I like that also because they're able to really just have a conversation with me rather in whole group direct teach. I don't hear from those students who are more reserved and don't want to raise their hand in a whole group. So in small group, I'm able to connect with each and every student that way, and they really enjoy that too. I think the blended model has really improved my behavior management, classroom management. I really enjoy it, and the kids really enjoy it too, because they're not just sitting in their desks the whole time. I think it's great that we have 25 minutes of direct teach with the Google Slides that the district provided. And then we're able to move around every 20 minutes after that, and they get a different kind of atmosphere. It's working out really well in the class, and the kids really enjoy it. So,
and I was speaking to your instructional coach and said that it's really shown in your kids' growth in their data. I definitely see super, great things in your classroom. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I hope to come back soon.
all righty. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Bye.